I recently reached out to you guys on YouTube and Instagram and told you to ask me anything about automotive photography, the business of automotive photography, and anything you guys had in mind. Now, you guys have asked about 100 questions, which is fantastic, but I've boiled those down to about 10 themes or topics that most of you guys are looking for. Now, the good thing is I actually have a ton of videos already. So for each question, I'll link in my description down below if I've already made a video on this topic, and I will put on the timeline here for YouTube a bunch of the different questions as well, so you guys can skip ahead or move to ones that interest you most. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question. I hope that I answer some of these questions for you guys, and if you guys have any additional questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. But let's dive into it. On the topic of gear, you guys have asked, what is my favorite focal length for shooting car photography and videography? Well, as you may know, if you've watched this channel for a while, I actually love the 35mm lens. To me, it gets the best scenario, but also you can get into the details. To me, it's the most versatile lens. But I've actually really been enjoying the 50mm lately. It's just a little bit different than what I'm used to, I guess, and adds a little bit more compression. And for when I'm looking for that compression, I do go to the 85mm. All of my lenses are the f1.8 from Lumix, so I have that consistency in size and weight, which is awesome. But I honestly tend to not go too much farther than that, because when you're shooting on an 85, you're already going so far back, you can get that compression, and I love it. Now, a quick note for those of you who are shooting on crop sensor cameras like the Sony APS-C, like the 6500s, for example, those sensors are smaller. So when you actually put a 50mm lens on that, you have to remember that you're cropping that lens 1.5 times, or depending on which camera you're using, it might be different. You might want a 50, so that means you probably have to buy a 30mm lens. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you know which kind of sensor size you're using and which lenses you need for those cameras. All right, you guys have asked, what are the best settings for shooting rollers in car photography? Now, a lot of you guys say on the internet that you match your shutter speed with the speed of the vehicle. So for example, if you're going 60 miles per hour, you're going to set your shutter speed to 1/60. Now, this is not a bad rule. If you're going 100 miles per hour, set it to 100. But technically, this just means that you don't fully understand your camera and you're using a rule to get there. Now, ultimately, what we're trying to accomplish here is getting the road blur while the car is still crispy sharp. So to understand how to do that, we need to understand shutter speed. Now, yeah, you can match your speed to your shutter speed, but really we're trying to actually get that shutter speed as low as we can while still having a tack sharp vehicle. Something to note here is that as you move your shutter speed slower, so lower down, so 1/15 or 1/20 or 40 or whatever it is, that is the amount of time that your shutter speed is opening and closing. So if you open the shutter speed and your distance and all of that stuff stays the same with the car that you're shooting and you don't bump up or down, that's how you're going to get a perfectly sharp image of the car. And because it's open slowly, the road blur is going to keep moving in front of it, but you and the car stay at the exact same distance and time and all that stuff. So that's what we're going for essentially. Professionals like myself, we try and get that shutter speed as low as possible. I've seen some people do as low as 1/15, which is great, but you're probably gonna miss a lot of shots unless you have great image stabilization. So I'd say I tend to start at 1/50, no matter what the speed I'm going, and I know I'm gonna get a decently good shot. From there, once I have my shots, I'm going to start slowing that down a bit to try and get even more motion blur. So if you want a cheat code for the settings here, start with your shutter speed at 1/50, set your ISO to 100, and then from there you can use your aperture to set proper exposure. This will also add more depth in your image. Now, I have got a lot of questions from you guys about settings, not just about rollers, but about car photography in general. So I did make a course for you guys. I'll link it down below, and it's a 60-minute course that breaks down all of your camera settings and how you can actually truly understand them. Instead of me just tell you here and it not work in your scenario, you can actually understand your aperture, ISO, shutter speed, and then be able to implement that in any scenario that you're in, including rollers. There's a whole section on that. I've lowered the price for you guys, so go check it out down below. Now, I've recently got a ton of subscribers to the channel that have followed me because of the Osmo Pocket 3. So thanks guys and welcome to the channel. You are asking what's the best way to get set up. Now, of course, I have videos for this down below, but some of the quickest ways to get your Osmo Pocket 3 set up and running at the highest quality is to start shooting in manual mode. Follow the shutter speed rule, so make sure that you're using 1/50th if you're shooting at 24 frames per second. If you're shooting at 60 frames per second, shoot at 1/25 on your shutter speed. Your aperture is fixed on that camera, which is great, and then minimize how much ISO you're using. The biggest thing that's going to help you guys here is using ND filters. You absolutely have to use ND filters if you want to get the most like cinematic motion blur out of that camera. Also set the color science to their log profile. This is how you're going to get the most dynamic range out of it. And they have LUTs on their website that you can correct that footage, but that gives you more ability in post-production to push that footage around. Best case scenario, when you're setting your settings, you want to make sure to adjust so that your highlights are not overexposed. You want to keep the brightest parts of your image exposed, and then in post you still have the detail from the shadows that you can bring up and set the contrast how you want. Lastly, I do use my own cinematic finishing LUTs to make sure to get that finishing touch. They're linked down below. We got a ton of questions on what is the best camera or the best budget camera that you guys can use. I'm currently using Lumix cameras. I have used Sony cameras and I think they're awesome, and I've also used Canon cameras. The best camera that you guys can get is honestly whichever one you have and whichever one is in your budget. What I suggest you look for is something that can shoot in RAW, because again, if you understand the settings of those cameras, the settings have been the same ever since film cameras were around when your grandparents were shooting photos. So you need to truly understand the settings, and then you can have a cheap $500 camera that your aunt gave you, or you can go buy a $5,000 Sony and still get similar results as long as you're able to shoot in RAW. If your focus is on video, for example, then it does get a little bit more complicated on which settings you need to use the most, what kind of bit rates they have in those cameras, and then we need to do a little bit more research. I like the Lumix cameras because I find them to be the best balance between photo and video. They have 24 megapixel photos, which is great, but they also shoot like 6K, 10-bit, all the fantastic video settings that you need as well. So I found those cameras to be the best for my use cases, as I'm a hybrid shooter, always shooting photo and video. If you're looking for a great budget camera right now, I know that this is a very interesting topic on the internet, but the Lumix S9, I have used this thing like a lot since I've got this camera. It's great for those of you who are trying to get into video, but also has a ton of great photo functionalities. This thing's huge. The best thing about this is that it is a full frame camera, and on a budget that is absolutely incredible. A lot of people suggest the Sony APS-C cameras, also fantastic for you, like the A6500, 6400, 6700. They're fantastic cameras, but eventually you probably want to move up to full frame cameras anyways. So this is a budget full frame camera that's an absolute slayer. Highly recommend this, and I use it all the time. So look into the Lumix S9 or the Lumix S5 II as well if you want to get into that. Someone asked, what's the best setting for shooting multiple cars in one frame? This is actually a fantastic question. I have made a YouTube short on this, so I'll put it down below, but the biggest setting that you need to change in your camera is your aperture. Aperture affects so much, whether it's distance, the amount of depth of field in your image. So if you have multiple cars, if they're at the same plane of distance, so if you can see my hand here, it's in focus, but my head is not. So if you have different cars in different planes of focus, you need to change your aperture higher so you can have multiple things in focus. Now, if you're far away, my hand's in focus here, but my face is. So the farther you go from the camera, you can still have a decently low aperture. But what I would do is if you have multiple cars, you're gonna wanna open your aperture to around 5.6 or higher to have things on different planes be still in focus with each other. Again, all of this is in my mastery course down below, so go check this out because I really do think it's gonna give you guys a deeper understanding of your cameras. Now, we had a lot of questions on how to get started as an automotive photographer. Now, this is actually a really interesting topic, and I really only have my own experience to go off of, but the way that I did it is I actually went on YouTube and I learned as much as I could. I downloaded photos from other creators that offered me RAW, and I learned how to edit using their photos. One thing I do recommend as you guys learn how to be an automotive photographer is try not to work on your own style right away. Learn what the best in the business are doing and try your best to make your style emulate theirs. Try and edit like a magazine you like Car and Driver or something like that. Then as you learn the tools of the trade, you can start to develop your own style as you go. But I highly recommend striving for the top shelf, not necessarily the people that you like on Instagram, but the people that are doing it professionally. Like myself even, I focused on learning how the professionals do it. So now hopefully my photos look professional. I mean, I am working with large brands, so I guess we've kind of made it. So if you guys want, I will leave a link down below with some photos for you guys to edit, and then do your best to edit them professionally, as professional as you absolutely can. The next thing I did was I started an Instagram page or a channel where I specifically shot cars. This is where you can actually establish yourself as a car photographer, and you can start telling people that you're a car photographer, and you can use that page specifically for your automotive photography. That way you can brand yourself, you can tell brands who you are, what you want to do for them. And the last thing, no matter what car you have to shoot, I have a video on this. It was kind of funny. It was actually 6 years ago, almost to this day, that I was shooting a Toyota Corolla, and I said, shoot that Toyota like it's a Ferrari. And some of you guys know that this year I went to Italy with Shell and shot Ferraris. We drove on the Ferrari track. So make sure that you're shooting with the goal to be the best. Don't just shoot a Corolla in a trashy part of town. Shoot it in the best part of town, and then maybe you'll get noticed by Toyota, and then maybe you'll get to work with Toyota. It's a long slog, but if you set yourself up with the foundations, then you'll have a better shot in the long run. How do you find cars to shoot as an automotive photographer? I genuinely think that this is actually the hardest thing for us automotive photographers. Whether you're starting out or even now, I still have a hard time finding vehicles to shoot with. So this is a great question. This question also kind of harks back to how you start, but you really do start by shooting your own vehicle. Shoot whatever car you have access to. Learn the angles, learn which angles you like, copy angles that you see on Instagram, but physically get in front of that car and actually take pictures. Whatever car you get access to, like I said previously, show professionalism in that edit. You might be shooting a Mercedes SUV that's just a fun one that your parents have, but if you can make that SUV look fantastic, then you can post that to your page and show professionalism. Once you have a few photos that you're really proud of on your Instagram that look professional, that if you showed up on your page, you'd say, dang, I wish they'd take photos of my car, then you can start reaching out to people that have fancy cars. Now, a great way to do this in the way that I did it is I follow a lot of people that are local car photographers in the Calgary area. If they're taking photos of a certain person's car, then I tag that car as a local car, and if you are ready, you can reach out to them. Now, what I might suggest when you reach out to these cars on Instagram is, instead of just saying, hey, I want to offer you a free shoot, say, hey, I've got a great idea for a shoot. It's at this location, and I think your car might be a great fit for this. I'm going to offer this to you for free. Let me know if you're interested, or have any other friends who own cars that are interested as well. That way, they don't have to come in blind and say, sure, what's your rates? Where do you want to do it? You've already taken out the legwork for these people, so they don't have to stress about the details. You just have to find a time that works and go shoot. My best example of this was, there was a McLaren in Edmonton. I reached out to him. I proposed a great idea, and he was like, yeah, and I'm gonna bring all my other Lamborghini friends. So that led to me having 5 new contacts of supercar owners, and now I had a great shoot because we had 5 supercars. Now, how do you find cool car photography locations? This is a super fun one. I do have a video on this down below, but I am literally always keeping my eye out for car photography locations. On my Apple Maps, I have a whole bunch of pins saved of places that I can go. So if I'm driving around, I will literally look for great walls, textured walls, landscapes that have the sun setting or rising in those locations, and then I'll pin those spots. So make sure that you're always keeping your eyes open. Remember, it doesn't have to be an entire environment that looks good. You're looking for one focused area that you can park a car in. One thing I'll remind you here too is the car is the focus. So the spot doesn't have to be extravagant or crazy. It helps if it maybe matches the mood, but for the most part, your focus is on the car. So you're looking for something that won't distract too much and take away from the image. In fact, I did a video on this topic where I was shooting with Porsche, and they gave me a whole book of things that I had to do and things to avoid. That was actually a really fun video to shoot, so I'll link that down below because they had a whole bunch of rules and I shared them with you so you guys can know what the big brands like Porsche are looking for, and you can integrate that into your photography. For those of you who are ready to take this beyond just taking photos of cars and you want to start to build a brand and make money doing this, that's what we're going to talk about now. A lot of you had questions on how to actually build your photography business. So step one is set up your Instagram or your social accounts or your YouTube in the way that you are showcasing it as a business card. When people are going to come to your channel or Instagram, this is your first impressions. Now, I made a great video with one of the PR firms that I worked with that ran a Toyota Canada project, and they were willing to give me their time on how you guys can set up your Instagram channels, what PR and marketing firms are looking for from creators like you and me. So I'm going to link that down below. It's a podcast, super helpful information in there. So I highly recommend checking that out. But here's the steps that they told me. The way that you showcase your landing page on Instagram, who you are, what you do, and the services that you offer is critical. As well, they dig deep into how you caption your photos and videos, how you respond to comments, the interaction on your posts, all those things play into how brands will interact with you and what the brands that they're working with. Essentially, it's always PR firms that will reach out to you. Sometimes it's the brands directly, but you need to make sure that your entire brand is your business card and how you want to be represented. Sometimes they even think about swear words. If you've worked with PlayStation, then Xbox won't reach out. So it starts with getting really clear on who you are, what you want to do, and what services you provide. So it's a really great start. The second thing when you're building a brand or you want to start making money is how can you set yourself apart? For a lot of the people that I see on my Instagram posting car photos, they're really just saying, this is the car that I shot, this is the first of the 3 sets that I'm going to do. And that's honestly great, your photos are awesome, but your caption's boring as heck. You're not building a brand at all, nor am I connecting with you. So you want to be able to build yourself a brand that sets you apart. Now, the way that I have chosen to do that, whether it's the way you want to do it or not, it's fine, is I've chosen to be an open book, no gatekeeping, and teach and educate you guys on how to do car photography. That's my angle. That's what I love to do. So maybe there's something in there that you guys can do. I always suggest educate, inspire, entertain. If you can hit one of those 3 pillars, then maybe you've got something going for you, but you need to find your thing that sets you apart from me or other car photographers. Someone also asked some of the biggest mistakes that I've made in building this brand or building the business, and honestly, probably living in Canada is one of the biggest mistakes because we get snow here 6 months of the year, which is hella annoying because all the nice cars go away. But honestly, the biggest thing that I've had to learn in this industry is the ebbs and flows of being a content creator. Sometimes I'm on top of the moon and I'm just creating content like a madman and I'm loving it. But there's also times where opportunities are slower and I have less energy. So I have to be able to be okay with the highs and the lows of being a content creator and what kind of comes with that. If you guys are content creators, then maybe you've also experienced that too. It's the emotional highs and lows of having great projects and then having no projects and having to manage that. That's been tough at times. The last thing I'll say when it comes to building the brand in this business is that I've had to learn business as I go. I'm not a business-minded person, I'm a creative. So if you're a business-minded person and you have the creative brain, you're probably off to the races. I hate saying that. I say off to the races all the time. But where I may have fallen short on the business side, I do try and make up on the relationship side. I'm also very relationship minded when it comes to partnerships, brands, or even just shooting locally with cars. My objective is always to build a human relationship with someone. So that's been my business strategy. Build great relationships with the guy who owns the Toyota Corolla or Shell, who I've had the pleasure of working with this year. Just build as best of a relationship as you can with those people, because that's how you're going to build a long-lasting brand and business. Someone asked what came first for me, the love of photography or the love of cars, which led to photography, which is a great question. I actually started in this industry as a videographer a long time ago, doing documentary style videos. I actually really loved the lighting side of it, so setting up key lights and backlights and all those things and making interviews look good. That was my favorite part of the job. But I did eventually get the chance to shoot a car. And that is where all of the settings like aperture, ISO, shutter speed, and even editing in Lightroom really started to click for me. I actually really sucked at shooting portraits of people, nor did I enjoy it that much. But when I had the chance to shoot cars, all of the things, all of my knowledge clicked, and that's when things really took off for me. So I guess photography led to cars, but I've always loved cars. So I think it was just when I took my skills and turned it towards my passion, that's when I was able to kind of create this space, what it is right now. And I love it. So thank you guys so much for your questions. Make sure to go check out any more videos down below. You might want to subscribe to the channel here, and you might like that video there. As always, I appreciate your guys' time so much. Thank you for watching, and I do hope I'll see you in the next video. Peace.